Oh, hi. Just me again. Okay, I'm still having the difficulties for some reason. I feel like I'm like one of those people who works in like the airplane where they have to tell how when airplanes can land and not land. I've got help things up. I've got how to connect to Instagram. Um, Thank you, Aditi. I really appreciate it. Okay, I feel there's been a technical. Okay, I'm not, no, there's no blame. I think we figured this out. Ian and I will speak to each other. Oh, yes. Okay, I see the Okra Project. Okay. Okay, I'm going to lift this up so I can get a better traction. Yep, was just about to place a comment as if that would be helpful. Oh, yeah, good. Turn the screen and look at my computer. Great. All right. My God, why? I see you. Why isn't this working? I'm gonna have to get like extra therapy this week. I see you. I see you. Go live. Waiting. We're
Hey
connected.
there. Oh, what fun.
I mean, I've never been happier to see a person.
Well, that's a great way to start an interview or a conversation.
I could just sit here and stare at you in your square for 21 minutes and I'll just be delighted. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me.
I I DM'd you yesterday about how I was so nervous.
And that's where I went. So that's where I was the whole time. I was on my page, my personal page, and I was on the
I
Tegan and Sarah page, not Tegan and Sarah Foundation. So that's
It's
where I was.
true. It's true. And I know I thought I had this moment when I logged off and I added your personal page because I thought, if this is the problem, is that there's communication difficulties. This is so boring. It's a great place for me to launch. Actually, deep in my questions for you, I was going to ask you about your own social media fatigue and if you were feeling overwhelmed and how you have been coping. I think it's a great place to start. It's not
That's
as
a fabulous place to start.
start there. That's what I'm thinking.
Yeah, no, we're definitely experiencing a lot of fatigue over here at the Okra Project, and I am individually as well. But I think it's all for great reasons because we have like so many people who are reaching out to us and want to work with us. But what we encourage folks to remember is that we are a team of like four people,
Yeah.
and that fourth person was just recently added, kind of in the midst of all of this. So we have a lot of unread DMs, a lot of unread emails. Here we are, y'all. We're doing the work, and so I think that a lot of it has been the priority to make sure that, like, kind of we have we have a staff meeting on Monday, and then we have a mental health check-in staff meeting on Friday, which is like no work at all. We just like talk about like how we're feeling, where we're at mentally, and on this yesterday's staff meeting, I reminded all of all of our crew, our team, just be like, look, the point of this work is like all of this is great, all of this attention that we're getting, all of these followers, all of this stuff, but all of that is not what the work is. What the work is actually working with the people and working with our community and making sure that our people are taken care of. But also so grateful that I get to have moments like this with you and with all of you beautiful people who are watching.
Yes, thank you to all the people who stuck it out through that through the technical difficulties. I'm sure Tegan is watching and just laughing so hard because she often is the one who connects these calls, and I just get to be the person who's connected too. So,
Mhm.
props to Tegan. You mentioned the work, what the work actually is. Tell
Yeah.
us work. We want to hear about the Okra Project and sort of what you're broadly doing with the Okra Project, and also how you're responding to the needs of the community in real time as the weeks go on.
Yeah, so the Okra Project, in our first iteration, we are a collective that seeks to address the global crisis faced by Black trans people all around the world, wherever we can reach them. Our initial sort of founding was on the principle of hiring Black trans chefs to go into the homes of Black trans people and cook healthy, home-cooked, and culturally specific meals for them. And then, I don't know if you've heard of this really unknown artist by the name of Miss Rona. But she's going through a small little world tour right now. We're just gonna see how it goes for her. Hope that she gets somewhere. But obviously she's kind of changed the game for everybody.
Yeah.
And so our first reaction to that was to create grocery bags that we were distributing to folks. Then we had a huge food donation, and we packed up the back of a car and went door to door, giving out basically having a traveling grocery store for folks.
Mm-hmm.
And then what happened was that we created the on May. Yes, May. I know where I am. What is time? But May 31st, quarantine standard time. We created the Nina Pop and Tony McDade Mental Health Recovery Funds, which set Black trans people up with one-time 100% free mental health therapy sessions with Black therapists, as a way to sort of address the growing climate of violence that we face on a daily basis, as well as the growing number of deaths that we face on a daily basis.
It's incredible, and I love the sort of ecosystem of things that you're trying to do with the Okra Project. And it's really interesting to me that so much of our physical health, and I think about the way we eat or the way that we treat our bodies, is so deeply connected to our mental health. And when I saw the and sort of the aim of what those funds are trying to do, it made me think about some of the work we've done with the Tegan and Sara Foundation around cultural competent healthcare. And I think a lot of people, that's a lot of words. It's a bit of a word salad, but I would love to talk about that with you around this idea of cultural competency, whether it's, like you said, culturally specific meals, or it's about working with healthcare professionals who we are not walking in the room and explaining something about ourselves to them. They're the professional. They understand, and they have that knowledge base. I'd love to talk about that with you, because that seems to be so central to the work that you're trying to do.
Absolutely. I mean, I think that part of the relevancy around the work that we do is that we are of the community. The folks that we are serving are, strangers to us in some ways and family to us in many other ways. Many of the folks that we're serving are folks that we spend time with in community. Many of you, our sister organizations and sibling organizations are folks that we commune with, socialize with, chat with. There are lots of group chats. Y'all ain't never gonna know nothing about what happens in them. But there are lots of spaces that we're holding for all of our folks. And I think that in regards to the larger scope of things beyond kind of what we are doing specifically at the Okra Project, I think, is the recognition that the necessity of cultural competency across the board requires a lot more in-depth work than I think that a lot of people are ready to talk about. The reality of creating culturally competent healthcare is not just about checking boxes. It's about actually looking at the day-to-day procedures. A lot of the barriers that trans people face are kind of those everyday things. I was just in a meeting talking about an institution, and we're kind of trying to address sort of the larger framework of how they want to do EDI, or equity, diversity, and inclusion work. And something that I brought up is the reality that for many trans people, when we fill out payroll information, we have to use a name that we no longer use in the space. And sort of there's this very strange toxic, almost power dynamic that exists between those who create payroll and those individuals who are employees that are trans, because these people now have access to names that we may not want to be ever referred to. They now have access to information about us that we may not want to share. And those are just some of the small ways. And often when they're putting things through systems, those systems don't take into account chosen names, preferred pronouns and things like that. They just refer to you by what, like, government IDs have. And obviously, the institutional government has made it incredibly difficult for people to get those IDs, to get those forms that say, this is who I am and this is how you should refer to me. And so I think that part of that cultural competency work is making sure that we are a part of the solution, that we are central to the solution even.
Yeah. I think that's huge. And it is so insidious within the, like, it's not just one system. It's kind of like built into every system. And so when you start, I think when you start to recognize it, you see it everywhere. It can be overwhelming. This is going to be an abrupt question change, like coming.
Love it.
I'm mostly thinking about this because when I was going through your bio and looking at your work just outside of the Okra Project, I saw that you do a lot of podcasting, and that and I've been thinking a lot about podcasting just sort of like in general culturally, but also as a part of these political movements, and this opportunity to sort of work in items that like as a sort of like almost like, I say punk because that's kind of the world I grew up in, but like almost like a punk response to being ignored or underserved by other forms of media. So like traditional radio that's so contingent on like advertising and sort of like checking boxes and saying the right things, or television, of course. But podcasting is a medium, especially because it's an affordable way for you to sort of create storytelling or ideas or interviews. And there are so many ways to get that information out. I wanted you to talk about it because you're obviously using that medium a lot to talk about the work, not just political work, but you're a performer as well. And so I just was interested sort of like what your experience is, where your where your inspiration is. Are there other podcasts that you feel like are doing great work or talking about things? Just podcasting in general.
Yeah, absolutely. I've always I feel sneeze coming on, so if it comes, it's gone now. It's gone now. Yes. Even my sneezes have a stage presence. Okay. So I think that podcasting for me, I've always found great comfort in that. I think when I first moved to New York City, like, I moved here and I didn't know anyone here. I knew like a couple people who had graduated from my school, perhaps, like, or I think one person who graduated from my school. But I moved to New York City pretty much because like I had a dream and I was following it, and I had a job and an apartment, and so. But when I first moved here, like so much kind of like, finding community, particularly, as because of how systems are in place, sometimes it can be hard to find like your community and where you want to be. And so podcasting was like a really great way that I could find my community, find my folks. Like I started listening to The Read with Kid Fury and Crystal, and that has always been like a source of such great comfort for me. And so I think that for me, like so much of like the podcasting world has been that for me. It's been like, the ability to sit down and create space and for people to have like interesting conversations and to approach things in different ways. And it feels like you get to sit in the room with folks and hear from them, and you feel a little bit less alone. And you also can feel engaged and thoughtful. Now so much of, like news media is also using podcasts as a means of like, following up. And so, or following up, by which I mean that, there are many like news media who will then take like their segment and put it into a podcast. Like you can have access to TED Talks, access to this. And I think the fact that there is like this large community of resources, as I see them, of fictional storytelling as well as, nonfiction, as well as just conversations between individuals, like news, there's so much that's available now. And the fact that, for the majority, all of it is free. I think that's incredibly important. And so I definitely hear you as far as like, that hearkening to like a very punk mentality of like, for the people. And I think that, that for me has been so essential of like, of also like shaping kind of what information I'm taking in, because I've always valued, like I'm a debater, and I'm a triple Leo, so I love like debate, I love leadership, I love all the things, So I'm all about engaging in dialogue with folks, and I think that that's like where I learn and thrive the best. And so being able to kind of like be the little fly on the wall of a podcast, I think it's been great, and then to actually do them myself has been really really great as well.
That's really cool.
Thank you for an actually original question. I've never gotten that question before.
You there's probably my girlfriend's probably like sitting in her office right now smiling because last night I specifically said, as a performer, as an artist who has spent a lot of time being interviewed, I have such empathy. Like I went and watched all the videos and all the things that you've been doing so much work and doing so much education and talking and answering. And I know it's not the question, but it's like you get asked the same stuff over
Yeah,
and over again, and it can become so it's just difficult to come up with like original, fresh answers. Like,
absolutely.
and I just was like, I have got to come up with some other
You're
questions. And
grateful.
also just thinking about like, sometimes Tegan and I will get a question and Tegan will start answering in a way that it's like not even it's not an answer to like the question. It's just an answer to a question. Like she's just saying something that she's interested in saying because
Yeah,
I just think, oh, I don't want to waste this next 5 minutes rehashing something that's like already out there on the internet. So but I did think you had like a very there was an abundance of podcasting in your bio, and I was like, this is
yeah,
interesting to me. It also just sort of speaks to this, like, what strikes me about you is that you're sort of representative to me of this like really inspiring wave of people who are using these technologies in innovative ways to reach people in a fresh way. Because
you.
it's so easy to be exhausted and inundated with news. Like, how do or stories or ideas. And I feel like it's just really fresh. And I feel like that's why it's resonating and why it's really connecting. And the work too. I mean, I love part of what drew me into the Okra Project is just, it's not, I mean, I know it's delivering food and it's preparing these meals, but I also saw that you sometimes do what would you call it, like mentorship, or you would do like programs where you can go in and learn from the chefs themselves,
Yeah, or Okra
yourself.
Academy.
I
Yeah,
love that. I love that because it really speaks to this idea of like, you're not just offering a service, you're really planting seeds and nurturing that within the community, which
absolutely.
is really cool. um, I wanted to ask you about the Brooklyn Liberation event for trans folks a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah.
So epic, really kind of, I mean, that to me is like historical. It's so massive. Your speech, middle fingers in the air, the police helicopter. I mean, it's like, to me, it was like electrifying, goosebumps. I was so moved. I wanted to get your take on that experience and what that meant to you. But I also wanted to talk before we wrap up. I want to talk about what to me is the next the next sort of iteration of the LGBTQ plus movement and around pride specifically, and how we can do better and how our prides really moving forward I mean, the Brooklyn Liberation event to me is sort of almost the blueprint of what we need to be thinking about in terms of pride moving forward.
Well,
And
thank you so much for that. And I'm
anywhere, whichever.
no, but thank you so much for saying that. I'm so grateful to have been a part of that moment in history. It really does feel that way, and also to like every single person who was involved in making that happen. We basically had folks who showed up and said, we believe in what we believe that you are the person to guide us through this, but like we want to create this moment, but we know that we're not the people to do it. And that's not something you hear very often. And it really worked. And the fact that they actually were dedicated to doing that, because so many people kind of say like, oh, you take the lead, you do this. And it's like, really what you're asking me to do is to do all the emotional labor while you take the credit. And that has not been the case at all. And so I've been very grateful to be a part of that team, and very excited for the potential of what can happen moving forward with that team, as well as just, and just honestly just grateful to have like, just to stand on top of the Brooklyn Museum and to like,
Incredible.
speak from the heart to a crowd of 15,000 people. It's not something you do every day. And so I'm very grateful for that. But I think that kind of what you're referring to is, or what you were talking about was some of the next wave or whatever this is of, the queer movement. And I think that for me, what I felt that day is something that I feel like has been missing from a lot of like sort of mainstream prides for a while now, which is the joy in resistance. Right? Because I think that when we hear words like rebellion, resistance, protest, rally, there's always this association of rage and anger. And what I found was so beautiful about that day was that it genuinely, genuinely felt like every single person who was there was experiencing joy, and that was our resistance. We took pleasure in saying, you know, fuck you to the militarized police state. We took pleasure in like chanting to cops, like, you gonna lose your job, you know, you about to lose your job. Like that was just like, that was like one of our rallying cries. And I feel like, you know, like I think when people are able to say with relish and with pleasure, like actual like joy-centered pleasure, you know, like no justice, no peace, fuck these racist ass police, like that is something worth talking about. I think that's a pride that I can really get behind.
Yeah.
I think that, you know, and I want to be very, very clear. I am a very pro-sex person, I'm pro-ho person, pro-sex worker person, very all of those things. And so I want to be very clear that it's like, I have absolutely no beef with pride that is like, you know, very naked, very sex and hookup centered, very, you know, like to use our phrase, like dykes on bikes, very like all of the various like pieces of that exist. I'm here for every single bit of it because I'm not about playing respectability. I'm not about us like pretending that we need to like elevate ourselves, that we need to like, you know, sanitize pride for like allies who would come in or people who would enter the space. I believe that pride should be everything that we want it to be. But I think that the problem that I've seen in sort of the corporatization of pride is that we are marching with the very people who we were protesting when all of this began. We are protected and by the very people who are actively to this day, in this very moment, working to see us fall. There is a reason that we had to like give middle fingers, because there are drones flying over our heads. Like I need you to understand something, that like I was at a vigil yesterday, centering and celebrating the life of Oluwatoyin, who was a 19-year-old activist who was murdered and after reporting a sexual assault. At that vigil, at that vigil for her, and it was an all Black space. We were gathered around pictures of those we have lost and who have been taken from us, and we were saying their names. And as we did so, a drone was flying low over our heads, trying to distract us from what we were doing. That is the kind of militarized police state that we're living in right now, and that kind of thing, that's not what pride is about to me. And I don't think that's what pride, and that's definitely not what pride was meant to be. When pride first began, that's not what it was meant to be. So our pride needs to be in the pride that we take in saying fuck you to the systems that try to kill us and erase us over and over and over again.
Yeah, and I think it's a really powerful message to be delivering, especially during Pride Month, and especially because our community, lot of a big umbrella. It's a big umbrella, but we cannot forget that there is a significant amount of support and money in very specific areas of LGBTQ community, and those are the people with that sort of like white male cis privilege and power, and that money and those resources, they need to be redistributed to the other parts of our community. But also it's about having those parts of the community stand up and say, we acknowledge that this is happening. You don't want the police in our in our Pride event? Absolutely. We will not allow that. We will demand that not happen. And that's my call to right now to our community, is that we need to get on board for this. We can't, none of us are gonna win. None of us are gonna overcome any of this shit if we don't listen to the people who are telling us like these are the demands, this is what is required if we're gonna move forward with these events. And I thought the Brooklyn Liberation event, again, blueprint for how all the prides really should be looking moving forward. It should be about centering Black trans lives. It should be about no police in or out of uniform. It just, to me, seems like it's a no-brainer, and it's very inspiring. And I'm a total punk, like fucking burn down the system. I'm like on the Tegan and Sara Foundation website saying this, but like that's fine, it's fine. But like if we were on the Tegan and Sara band one, I mean, I would be using a lot more swear words, but I am Canadian, so and
something I do want to say really quickly is that you brought up kind of the idea that those that we kind of stand in opposition to are white cis white cis, you know, gay men. And I think that that is absolutely a part of the narrative. But I think it's also necessarily, you know, as two women who are sitting here and talking to each other, I think it's also really necessary that we open and acknowledge the fact that we have a whole community, a whole sub community of like primarily white women who identify as feminists and are called, you know, trans exclusionary radical feminists, right? And the fact that those white women are still given the space to be called radical feminists, right? Even that is a violence against trans people. And I know that we want to talk about, you know, J.K. Rowling, but J.K. Rowling is representative of a much larger problem that has been going on for a much longer time. Plus, also, J.K. Rowling no longer wrote Harry Potter. You can't take it from me. I refuse. So that's that on that. But like, I think it is necessary for us to acknowledge the fact that it's like the work, like we can't just cast, you know, cis white gay men as the only problem that exists, because that ignores a much larger problem. And especially when we as women are gathering, we don't have to talk about men because we got problems that we can discuss right here, you know? And I think that like, I'm all about like decentering men from conversation. I'm all about just like no men. Like, you know, trans men, obviously, like I support and care for, like trans men can stay and but like, you know, like literally, like I'm all about women when we gather having conversations about like how we as women are standing up for each other, are holding each other down. Because in my experience, it's been women, and specifically in my experience, Black women, who are the ones that hold me down. And so I think that when we as women gather, we don't have to even talk about these cis white men that exist, but we can talk about the fact that there are problems that we as women are not ready to talk about between each other. Because you cannot call yourself a feminist if you're trans exclusionary. There's no way to do it, because we're all women and we're here for all women.
You are totally right. And, you know, I know Tegan and I have kind of made it, I mean, how do you say this and police it, but or not police it, but like, you know, like how do I know or monitor it? It's like we have said, if you are a TERF, burn the albums, unfollow, fuck off. Like, we don't want you. It is not happening. And we are actively, you know, we are using language that we don't even normally use. Like, we're not really those kind of like, we're not that confrontational. You know, we're sort of been really proactive. I feel enraged when I think about the TERFs. I don't want them on our pages. I don't want them at our events. I don't want to be associated. And I think that is the approach that we have to take within the community. It's that clear. It's like, no, we don't support it. I don't care if they have space. I don't care if they can be amplified or, you know, whatever on YouTube, like not in our spaces, not on our platforms, not at our show. And they should.
And I think that that's the thing, is like, you know, something else that we need to talk about is the fact that we constantly debate with these folks, right? And what I love about what you're saying, what I want to uplift of that is that, like, what feels so good to me as a trans person hearing that is that it's like when someone is taking a hard stand on something, because I think that so many of us like want to have conversations where we're trying to find the middle line, you know, and we're trying to like, you know, open up the dialogue and have a conversation about these things. But I think what's so crucial in understanding this is that it's like when you debate something, going into a debate, you have to believe that the other side has something worth debating. And in that, when you enter into a debate about these things, in that moment, you have betrayed trans people in that way. Don't enter into debates with TERFs. Don't enter into debates with any of it. Take this approach. And I'm talking to the kind of the people who are listening as well, as, you know, in general, just like take this approach of like, no, we ain't having any of it, because that's the level that we now have to be at, because people are dying over and over and over again, and it's not, and the numbers aren't going down, and the people, like, because we need to think about these people as more than just numbers. These are people who had families, who had people that loved them, people that cared for them, people that could not, like, who would wake up and text them first thing in the morning, and that was their process. And now that is ripped from people's lives, you know? And that needs to be the level of seriousness that we take with this stuff, because transphobia is not transphobia is actively killing people today. It is happening right now. And so I so appreciate you for naming that and in this space and be like, no, this is a hard line. And I think that we need to have more people, and specifically more celebrities, who are saying, this is the hard line, you can't cross it.
Yeah. You know, I'll be honest, sometimes, you know, I feel bad. I don't feel bad for celebrities, but like, I do think a lot of people, we're down here doing the work. We care about this. This is our community. These are our friends. These are our people. We are, you know, like, this is really innate, like it's built into my world. I've had so many people reach out since we started publicly talking about TERFs that are just like, what is that? Like they're just so confused. And I think like there is this kind of explosion of information for people right now. And so I think you're going to see, I believe, and I require and demand this of my social circle anyways, I think you're going to see this kind of this social awareness, like cultural awareness about how we are all actively participating in the harm of Black trans people if we are not speaking out against it. And I think that there was this kind of, maybe it's a benefit of a doubt, but I think a lot of people didn't realize that by doing nothing, saying nothing, not knowing that they were actually participating. And I guess I'm hopeful in thinking that now that people are being educated, that we will see these kinds of events and this kind of support and these declarations. It's not accepted here. Our fans know it. I think all these other celebrities and bands who want to seem down with the LGBTQ people and are great allies, let's see it, say it, declare it, show it. We want to know.
I'm so not interested in like a banner that you're going to put up or a flag you're going to put up. Like that doesn't save my life. Like all that's going to do is that's going to give them something to wrap a body in. Yeah. They'll wrap that body in that flag, you know. That's not enough for me. Yeah. So what I want to really have celebrities start saying in this moment is like, here are the hard lines. Here's where people get like y'all on the outside. Yeah. How does that feel? You know? Trans people come to the forefront. Yeah. Y'all stand right here next to me. Come get on stage with me. Share the platform with me. You know, that's the level of seriousness that we have to take this. And I think that, you know, we are in a particular moment and in a particular time where I don't know what happened, whether it be Miss Rona and her world tour, or whether it be, you know, like just whatever, or the fact that we're all inside and we're just looking for a reason to get outside. But whatever has brought the people into the street day after day after day, we keeping that energy going. That energy needs to stay here till 2021, 2022, 2023, and onward and onward. And I said this at the Brooklyn Liberation March, which I said, what we have established today is the lowest bar. We have set the lowest bar, the lowest expectation that we should have when Black trans people die, which is that if Black trans people are murdered, 15,000 people plus show up. We've set the bar. Now it is 15,000 or nothing. You know, we out here now. There's no other option. It's 15,000 or 20,000, 50,000, 100,000. Like that's how many people need to flood to the streets when a Black trans woman is murdered, because that is what she is worth.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, I love you. You're amazing.
Oh, thank you.
I could do this all day.
Absolutely, but I know that we have a time limit. So
I know. You just, there's so much, because you are, it's not just the Okra Project, it's you, and it's the energy, and also I think like this movement, and it's inspiring, and it's incredible. Tegan and Sara Foundation are honored, proud to be supporting the work. I hope we can continue to support the work.
And thank you for that grant. Thank you.
I love it. And also for the people that are watching, we will have lots of information about the Okra Project and all the stuff that you're involved in. And I hope that we get to do this again. I thank you for your time.
I'm here for it. Let's do it.
It was awesome.
Great. Sounds awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks to everybody. Thank you.
Bye. Bye, everyone. Thank you for coming. Like I invited them.